We're talking about building a stronger world. Mr. Prime Minister, I want to start with you because one of the myths we really need to debunk is that foreign aid is charity. And we were talking about this in our walk down. We need to be clear, foreign aid is in fact not charity. And over the last 3 decades across the world, we have seen life expectancy actually increase by 7 years, while the number of people who are undernourished has declined. More than 2 billion people have gained access to safe drinking water, and the global literacy rate has improved by 11%. Those numbers, folks, mean that the money works. And it is also, I think we just need to break down where the money goes, okay? Sometimes it's going to organizations. Sometimes it is going domestically into countries like right here at home to buy things to send to other countries. How short-sighted is it not to invest in foreign aid, especially at this time?
Well, not investing is always short-sighted, and not doing so now is really, if you look at it, first we have to label it as investment. It's not charity, it's not just a simple cost, it's an investment. And often we do investment because we want something back. Now, we have a continent in the world, Africa, that will grow substantially in terms of population this century. And of course, if you give the people in the African states the same possibilities as in the richer part of the world, well, that's good for them, it's good for Africa, but it's good for the world economy. If you look what happened in China, and please, I do not like the Chinese system, but we have to acknowledge that they lifted some 300-400 million people out of poverty into some kind of middle class. That was good for them as individuals, it was good for China, but it meant something else. They are contributing in the economy, and it affects the world economy positively. So that's what we need to do now, and we need to also make sure that we do the investment that are required for the climate transition. And if we do not, that's the real cost. That's the cost when we cannot produce the food that we want to produce because the temperature has increased, let's say it's 2 or 3 degrees. That's the real cost that we need to keep an eye on and avoid by investing now. And lastly, let me also say, there is this narrative that is costly and that we don't have the resources. We have all the financial resources that are required in the world. If you just look at the top richest people in the world, their wealth, if you count 1, 2, 3, 4, and you come to number 6, and you have $1,000 billion net worth of wealth. And I'm not saying we're going to rob them, but I'm saying that is a clear signal that we have the resources in the world. Start investing. Solidarity means both that you have the empathy for others in other parts of the world, but you also get something back. Start investing.
It's not just good to do, it's necessary for our global economy. You know, Gargee, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has been very, very vocal on the issue of foreign aid, the importance of foreign aid, and we know that every dollar cut from budgets has a real world impact. I mean, just we can't talk about the climate crisis and the refugee crisis that is gripping the world and also not look at what is happening as it relates to foreign aid budgets being cut. Meanwhile, when you've got people who are doing the right thing, countries like Spain, right, they are not celebrated enough. So how can we build public support in key countries and also ensure the negative course is reversed here before it's too late?
Thanks for that. I guess what hurts me the most about the situation we're in now is that we actually know how to lift up communities and help people lift their own families up. If you just look at something as simple as kids who survive past their 5th birthday, that number has grown dramatically for every decade of my life, of most of our lives, and it's threatened. That progress is threatened. Almost any indicator I could pull out, from maternal health to hunger, is getting worse. So there's never been a more important time for the world's richest countries, philanthropies, to show solidarity with humanity. You just have to look at the newspapers and imagine what isn't getting covered to feel that connection. But you're right. I mean, the problem we have is that, well, if you're watching this, you probably already care or are inclined to care. We're not reaching the people outside of this room. We're not activating enough people to care about these issues, to make the case that foreign assistance is something to be proud of. So I think a lot about how we need to change the case we're making. How do we advocate differently? With all due respect, not spend so much time talking to each other, but reach out beyond that. And there are a few things I want us to be trying at the foundation. I hope you'll try with me. One is talk more about successes. We spend a lot of time talking about the giant challenges out there, and it leads people to do what you said in the opening. Wonder, is the money working? If countries are still poor, has it all been worthwhile? And we need to be out there talking about the progress we have made and know how to make. Two, I think we need to start talking about the interconnectedness of our people and our economies, that foreign assistance actually includes the contributions of real people in our hometowns around this country. I'm not talking about tide aid or any of the sort of less effective or bad words in the development space. But we have incredible global health research happening in universities around this country. We have a diaspora community that, as you just heard, cares a lot about lifting up countries around the world. We have to activate those groups. And lastly, I think we've got to be really clear that everything we're asking for is just a tiny slice of the pie. We, in my world, get so wrapped up trying to make impossible choices, like should we advocate for vaccination or food? That's a ridiculous choice.
It's crazy because you could do both.
It's crazy. And the reality is the most ambitious we've been on aid, the most ambitious goal we've set for ourselves is 0.7% of GNI. That comes from the World Council of Churches 50 years ago. 0.7% of GNI would be enough. Less than 1% of this country and a few other countries' GNI would be enough to cover everything we're talking about to give families a fair start.
Less than 1%. Let's drill down a little bit on the numbers, because when you make the point, Gargee, about it, we're not talking about, nobody's talking about 50%, 75%. These are, the numbers matter. Wangari, we know that smallholder farmers, they receive less than 2%. Okay, 2% of global climate financing, which frankly already makes it difficult to address climate-related challenges on farms, and then even more so when you talk about supply chains. Can you describe for the audience here how cutting development assistance impacts the work that you do, and then the work of other farmers? And let's not even get in, we can even talk about the food shortage on this planet.
Yeah, so significantly smallholder farmers really do a lot towards the food security of the entire globe, not just for Africa and for the third world country. They contribute 30% while utilizing only 11%. So they are sustainable and they are climate smart, yet we disregard them. They are not represented well, they are not in unions, they are not, and for us as Farm on Fire is to first bring out the fire so that even when the aid comes, it finds people who are already in momentum and their mindset is in the right place, and they can be able to propel and own the projects and go ahead and make change. That being said, a lot has been done so far, so we want to say that something is happening on the ground. IFAD, all the non-government organizations, we are really seeing the changes on the ground, but still so much has to be done, especially now with the global issues of the war, lack of grain, climate change. We still need to do so much more so that we can pull everyone together. Remember, it's a food system. A system means that if one part misses, the entire thing collapses.
Gargee, I want to go back quickly to something you noted along those lines. This year, the World Bank is calling on donors to fully finance the IDA, which is the World Bank's fund that supports the 75 poorest countries to address basic needs. But funding the IDA should not come at the expense of supporting the work of organizations such as Gavi, right? So the Vaccine Alliance. So if you could just give me your 30-second pitch to donors about why it's not an either or. What do you tell these folks that say, we have to prioritize one issue over the other?
think there's never been a better moment to show solidarity with people around the world by investing in the very basics to grow economies, grow livelihoods, and that's all we're talking about.
Very succinct pitch. Mr. Prime Minister, when you were Prime Minister of Sweden, you allocated 1% of Sweden's budget for ODA, that foreign assistance we're talking about. That was a record. Okay, so could you quickly tell us why you made that choice?
Well, of the same reasons that I spoke about before, because it is, as I said, an investment. For me, solidarity works in two ways. One is showing empathy to others, brothers and sisters around the world. But the other is that you give more people a possibility to a decent life. And when you do that, you have more people in education. And when we do that, we know we can accomplish so much more. And why not use the whole potential of the world? When we discussed gender equity, gender equality, we said the same thing. Hey, why not use 100% of the potential, making sure that everybody has a possibility to develop in the way she or he wants? This is the same thing. We have to understand that this is not a cost. You're not throwing away money. You are investing in something that is good for the people that you are investing in, but also for yourself. There will be a return on those monies. So make sure that the world can develop and we are all better off.
I like what Wangari said about the food system being a system, and I think that applies to many of the other discussions we're having today. And if one part of the system fails, the system does not work. Last question to follow up, Mr. Prime Minister. To recap, we know foreign aid works, okay? We know it's a small amount of a nation's budget, and we also know countries are cutting their budgets and lessening their commitments. So as we close, what is your specific message to them? What's your 30-second elevator pitch to make sure that they don't fail their part of the system?
Well, if you want to live in a world that is stronger, that is better also for you, you have to make sure that you contribute with investments. Because otherwise, the people that don't get these same chances, the same possibilities, they can't do what they can do if they also get lifted out of poverty. We have this obligation, and I think speaking of South Africa and southern parts of Africa, there is this expression, Ubuntu, that I like. Ubuntu is I am because of you. So that is something that for me it's natural. But if you can't see that, you must be able to see that if you invest in other people, that is something that is going to come back in a positive way.
And Wangari, lastly, in my 30 seconds I have left, as we like to tell people on television, what is your hope? I think we should end on hope.
For me, I would just like to tell my story. As I stand here, it's a great honor for Global Citizen to give me a platform to also reach other African farmers. The thing with agriculture is that it's a low-entry industry where people with very few resources can be able to come in. And by that skilling that we get from the local humanitarian organizations funded from this conversation we are having here, is that people can be able to have hope, can be able to have dignity, can be able to take their kids to school. So by that just one action, it sparks so many other things that leads to development, because the people get to own the process and they get to make decisions from then on, compared to when they were just hopeless and in abject poverty.